The glass city of Aeropolis was just waking when something impossible crashed onto a quiet balcony. A wounded creature, no bigger than a kitten, scales glowing like shattered starlight, stared up with eyes full of ancient sorrow and silent hope. What the Pritchards didn't know yet was that this tiny dragon would shatter their ordinary lives and rewrite the meaning of family forever. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The day opened like a secret, thin and bright. Over Aeropolis, the glass canopy caught the sunrise and scattered it in ribbons along the tall towers. Inside a sky apartment facing the lanes where air trams slid like silver minnows, Dr. Nolan Pritchard stood with his mug cooling between his hands. Leela Pritchard hummed while the kitchen printed oatcakes and sliced fruit. The soft whir steady and familiar. They were ordinary people who liked ordinary mornings, which is probably why the alert surprised them so completely. The wall screen flashed amber, then settled into a calm, clinical crawl of words. Containment breach at the Stellar Fauna Conservatory. A research skiff limping near the outer loops. Request for citizens to report any unusual sightings. Leela tapped the feed open. In the grainy window, a tiny shape shimmered behind cracked hull panels. "That can't be right," she said, voice gentle but tight. Nolan went quiet. He had seen hurt before, but the image stirred something else. Curiosity, maybe, or the ache of a closed nursery door they never talked about before breakfast. He set the mug down. "We should stay clear, at least until the conservatory stabilizes." The apartment sighed as if it had an opinion, vents breathing out warm air. Then there was a sound, soft, like a cushion slipping. Both of them turned. On the balcony, crouched near the planter where Leela tried and failed to keep herbs alive, something small and blue was breathing. It wasn't a hologram. It wasn't a drone. It was a creature no bigger than a house cat. Scales the color of deep water, edges lit like frost. A narrow wing lay folded wrong. At the seam along its shoulder, thin silver blood tracked in a thread. The creature's eyes were wider than seemed possible, bright, unblinking, patient. "Nolan," Leela whispered, palms up, as if calming a nervous bird. "Look," he saw the tremor in the small body. The shallow rise and fade. A physician's training lit in his muscles. Assess, stabilize, comfort. But training also said, report the anomaly. He moved to the door controls and paused. "We should call first." "We will," Lila said, already setting out a clean towel. "After we help." When the balcony door slid open, warm air rushed out, and the creature gave a sound like a flute note wrapped in a purr. It didn't crawl away. Instead, it leaned, as if gravity had changed direction, and ended up pressed against Nolan's hands. Its scales were warm, not cold at all, almost pulsing like a steady drum somewhere inside. He saw the injury clearly. A slice, clean but deep, not infection yet, but pain for sure. "Easy," he murmured. "We've got you." He didn't know who "we" was in that moment, but the word fit. Lila sat beside him on the tile. "Hi, little comet," she said softly. The creature blinked, then closed its eyes like it wanted to rest and knew these two were enough. They moved with the quiet efficiency of people making a place safe. Leela warmed saline. Nolan cleaned the wound. The creature released a breath that smelled faintly of rain. "We'll call," Nolan said again, more to himself, and Leela nodded. They both knew the world was bigger than their apartment, and the right thing mattered. After the dressing was set, The creature tucked its head under Nolan's wrist. "We should name them," Leela whispered, then laughed at herself. "Too soon." "Maybe," Nolan said, "but not wrong." He looked at the scales, which shifted from midnight to cerulean when the light moved. "Cobalt?" The creature lifted its head at the sound, bright eyes curious, as if the word cobalt rang a bell it had always known. They called the conservatory. A quiet voice answered. Dr. Viola Kesser, who listened carefully, asked precise questions and did not sound surprised. She promised to come in person and asked them to keep Cobalt warm and calm. Nolan smiled at Leela. Both of them pretended they weren't already attached to this small, bright life. But the hook of the morning had not finished. As Cobalt slept, the city's distant traffic stuttered. The alert banner on the wall crawled new words. Unknown organism behavior includes empathic resonance. Avoid direct emotional surges. Leela frowned. What does that even mean? Nolan looked down. Cobalt, eyes closed, had synced its breathing to his. Whenever he exhaled slowly, Cobalt did too, and the pain tightened less. He felt a soft echo, like standing in a sea cave with waves returning what you whispered. It was delicate, not invasive, just a gentle mirroring, an affirmation. He glanced at Leela. "It means," he said, "we speak with our feelings, and Cobalt is listening." And then, for only a heartbeat, Cobalt's gaze went distant. The small body went still, like a thought held too tight. The air around them felt thin. "Cobalt?" Leela whispered. The creature blinked, eyes clearing, and pressed closer again. The moment passed, but it left a cool trail through Nolan's chest. Suspense tucked itself into the quiet of the room, promising this was only the beginning. Dr. Viola Kesser arrived without fanfare, a soft-spoken scientist with a careful smile and a satchel that unfolded into a compact lab. She greeted Cobalt first, palms open, eyes level, voice kind. Then she asked Nolan and Leela for tea, which set the pace. Nothing rushed, everything noticed. She examined the dressing and nodded. "Good work," she said. "Cobalt belongs to a line we've studied, empathic draconids. They map feelings the way we map streets. They don't pry, they mirror. When a safe person holds calm, they use that calm as a bridge." Lila's eyes warmed. "So Cobalt is safe with us because we tried to be safe with them." "Exactly," Dr. Kesser said. She glanced at her tablet. "There is a medical note. Short episodes during which consciousness drifts. Time feels slippery. It can look like they freeze. We call it a temporal slip." Nolan felt the word settle near his worries. "Is it dangerous?" "Usually not," Dr. Kesser said. "It can be scary the first times. A stable routine helps. Gentle grounding helps more." Leela shifted closer to Cobalt, who was watching them as if tracking a soft ping in the room. "We can do gentle," she said. Dr. Kesser hesitated, then shared her bigger thought. The conservatory and the city's foster network had been testing a quiet idea, pairing empathic guardians with children who carried heavy feelings. "I have watched Cobalt respond to fear by becoming still and soft," she said. "I've watched them respond to joy with curious play. I think Cobalt could help us help children." Nolan felt the world move a notch toward purpose. Leela, too. They had an empty room and a bigger kind of love than they knew what to do with. "What would it ask of us?" Leela said. "Patience," Dr. Kesser said. "Consistency, humor, listening. We have those," Nolan said, surprising himself with how certain his voice sounded. The first child came on a rainy afternoon that turned the canopy into a giant glossy leaf. Her name was May. She wore a yellow coat and clutched a small paper bird folded so carefully it seemed it might fly. Her caseworker introduced everyone, and then stepped back a little, giving space for the room to decide how it wanted to breathe. May spotted Cobalt first. Cobalt was lying on a sun patch like a puddle of deep blue glass. The creature lifted their head and looked at May, as if seeing a sunrise where a wall had been. No one hurried. May took one step and then another. Cobalt lowered their head to knee level and gave a small sound, a note shaped like a question. May did not speak at first. She held out the paper bird. Cobalt blinked at it, then delicately nudged it with their nose, as if to say, "I will not break your treasure." The paper bird did not fly, but May's mouth turned at the edges into something like maybe. That night, May sat cross-legged with Cobalt's head in her lap. She whispered a new name, Bluebell. Cobalt didn't mind the renaming, as if the new letters fit like a second soft coat. The house felt stitched with newly bright thread. A few evenings later, Cobalt froze again. It happened during a game, a simple red dot chase on the wall. 1 second, a cheerful pounce. The next, complete stillness, eyes fixed on something that was not the room. The air grew thin. Leela started forward, but May placed a hand very gently on Cobalt's cheek. "I'm here," May whispered. "Bluebell, I'm here." Nolan watched the monitor on Cobalt's collar. The rhythm steadied, the pause unwound. Cobalt blinked, pupils widening, and then leaned into May's small hand with a soft, relieved sound. The message came clear without anyone spelling it. Cobalt would help May hold her storms. May would help Cobalt hold their strange weather too. Dr. Kesar visited often, bringing quiet praise and careful questions. She noted how Cobalt mirrored without smothering, how the creature's humor, tapping a toy with a tail tip, hiding a sock behind a cushion, and pretending to be shocked when it reappeared, made heavy rooms lighter. She watched May sleep deeper and wake more curious. She watched Leela construct a nest of blankets because Cobalt seemed soothed by a tidy pile, and watched Nolan develop a humming pattern that Cobalt leaned into during the worst moments. "This is what I mean by a home stitched with light," Dr. Kesar said one morning, taking samples and smiling at nothing in particular. "You make a fabric. Cobalt learns the pattern. A child rests." Suspense threaded back into the days, not as dread, but as a question. Who would need this soft, strange trio next? The answer arrived on a weekday bright enough to make shadows cry. And with it, new bonds, new patience, and new ways to practice the art of staying. The twins came first, Theo and Raya, 6 years old, with matching copper curls and eyes that counted exits before they counted chairs. They stood in the doorway like two little captains deciding if the ship was worth boarding. Cobalt approached with quiet theater, keeping a respectful distance, then lifted 3 foam rings with tail and paws and tried to juggle. One ring fell on their own head like a crown. Theo gave a startled bark laugh. Raya followed with a giggle that tumbled into a smile. Just like that, the ship had a crew. Days arranged themselves around small rituals. Cobalt and Theo raced finger mazes. Cobalt always lost, with dramatic sighs that made both kids wheeze with laughter. Raya painted with Lila in the afternoons, and Cobalt lay nearby, scales reflecting color, slowly shifting like a living palette. At night, Nolan read stories while Cobalt hummed a low note that kept bad dreams from sticking. Then came Jalen, 10, who wore silence like a shield. Cobalt did not press. They positioned themselves at a gentle angle to his chair, head on paws, offering the sound of breathing as company. On the fourth day, Jalen read a page out loud, the first sentence barely audible, the second sentence clearer, the third full and steady, while Cobalt's eyes softened into quiet pride. Lilia arrived with a backpack full of worries. She jumped at the coffee printer, at the air tram rumble, at the doorbell's polite chime. Cobalt watched, then pantomimed being scared of a floating feather, scooting back with exaggerated care. Lilia's laugh came out as a hiccup. Cobalt fainted in slow motion at the sight of the feather landing, and Lilia, outraged at the feather's power, put it in a jar and named it Sir Easy. After that, loud things were still loud, but they didn't decide everything. Jas 11 came with quick anger that flared and burned out, leaving him tired. Cobalt didn't argue with flames. They became a stone under a waterfall, steady, cool, present. Jas learned to sit near that quiet and let his sparkiness settle. He didn't apologize every time. He didn't have to. The house was a place that recognized effort more than perfection. Then Riverin arrived. 8 years old, careful as a cat. He stood just inside the door, backpack on, voice even. "I don't like animals," he said. Cobalt stopped mid-step, considered him thoughtfully, and then padded to the far corner and lay down where Riverin could see them, but not feel crowded. For 3 days, Cobalt kept that respectful line. They tracked Riverin without staring, responded to questions with small chirps, and perfected the art of close but not too close. On the fourth day, Riverin sat down near the edge of Cobalt's space and spoke without looking up. "A dog bit me once." Okay. Cobalt lifted one wing, showing the tender membrane thin as a soap bubble, letting the light pass through, honest about their own soft parts. Riverin's fingers flexed, then relaxed. "Okay," he said, and began to breathe the room's air as if it belonged to him too. The Pritchards learned constantly. They learned to stock butterscotch pudding because Cobalt adored it. They learned that Cobalt's slips were less frightening when someone described the room out loud in present tense. "We are here. The window glows. Theo's socks don't match. Bluebell is warm." They learned that humor, done gently, could be armor you share rather than armor you hide behind. And then the news landed with that careful tone administrators practice. The Europa outpost needed Nolan. The work mattered. There would be time to prepare. But the truth was simple and heavy. Leaving meant changing the shape of everything. "What about Cobalt?" Lila asked, words quiet, the way a person speaks when she has already asked herself the question 100 times. Dr. Kessler visited that evening. "We can formalize a role," she said, "a guardian specialist placed with the foster network. I will hold legal custody. You will still be family, and we'll keep your connection alive." No one told Cobalt what to decide. No one could. Cobalt listened to the conversation, then to the silence that followed. After a long pause, they touched Nolan's sleeve, then Lila's hand. Finally, Cobalt faced the children gathered in the living room. They made a soft chord of sound, one that meant many things at once: gratitude, promise, and the kind of courage that looks like staying. The choice took shape. Cobalt would remain with Dr. Kessler and the city's children, serving in the new role. The Pritchards would go to Europa to start a branch that could hold the same light. They all cried, the good kind of crying, that waters something living rather than eroding it. Jas squeezed Cobalt's paw and said, "It's not goodbye, it's a longer hallway." Lilia made a tiny crown for Cobalt out of ribbon and paper stars. Riverin slid a note into Cobalt's nest. "Thank you for not rushing me." On departure day, Cobalt pressed a small, iridescent scale into Leela's palm. It was warm. Nolan tucked a soft cloth around Cobalt's nest and whispered the humming pattern one more time. The door closed gently behind them all, and still the threads held. Time did what time does. It filled with people and small miracles. On Europa, the Pritchards turned an unused lab into a room full of color and soft chairs. They adopted a Kalari child named Suri, whose skin glowed in shifting hues that worked like speech. Many found her communication strange. Nolan and Leela thought it was music with light. Suri learned the house's rhythms, learned the hum Nolan used to calm Cobalt, and made her own version in color. Their family felt like a lantern. Back on Aeropolis, Cobalt became a steady star in the network. Under Dr. Kesar's care, they trained a handful of other empathic guardians, some scaled, some feathered, one that looked like a walking tide pool, teaching them the slow arts of listening and playful patience. Cobalt's time slips still came, sometimes longer than before, but the children learned how to be anchors. When the air thinned, small hands narrated the present. You are here. The window shows rain. We made noodles. The funny clock is crooked. Cobalt returned each time with a grateful blink. News traveled across the system that the Europa program needed help. Cobalt listened to the idea the way they listened to a shivering child, with full attention and no hurry. They remembered Leela's promise about long hallways. They remembered Nolan's steady hands, the early mornings, the first paper bird. One evening, Cobalt hummed to themselves and accepted the transfer. The reunion at the Europa dock was a soft collision of joy. Cobalt, larger now and richer in color, bounded across the bay and nearly knocked Nolan off his feet with a full-body lean. Leela laughed and cried, which Cobalt apparently considered an invitation to lean harder. Then Cobalt saw Suri. Her skin turned cautious yellow. Then curious violet. Cobalt lowered their body until they were small again and placed one paw forward like an invitation. Suri lifted both hands and touched the tips of his scales. Cobalt began to hum, not the old lullaby, but a new tune, and Suri's colors answered in gentle waves. The air felt like an embrace. Europa borrowed Aeropolis's best ideas and grew new ones. Cobalt led trainings, coached guardians through first placements, and invented a game where children taught a dragon to be brave about silly thing. They used it with a boy named Benno, who had packed anger around old hurts. He learned to unspool his temper by teaching Cobalt to face a harmless wind chime. A girl named Zoe learned to join groups by assigning Cobalt missions that required her to ask two peers for help. A teen named Danny learned that belonging could be a feeling inside a chest rather than a pin on a map. The echoes began to return as people. One afternoon, a young woman with tight black curls streaked with early silver stepped into the nursery and stopped when Cobalt looked up. Her smile shook. "Bluebell," she said, and that was all it took. The room filled with a history both of them could feel. It was May, grown now, training as a social worker. They hugged in the way dragons and humans do, which looked like wings and arms and a lot of relieved breath. Others followed, Theo and Raya, who ran a training center for new foster families. Jalen, a quiet teacher who kept a library of books with dust jackets repaired in neat tape. Lilia, who started a camp where kids practiced bravery in small, funny ways. Jas, who specialized in angry kids and taught them how to sit with a stone that never flinched. Riverin, who moved policy with gentleness and stubborn grace. Each brought stories. Each left kindness behind like seeds. A journalist asked Cobalt once, "What makes you special?" Cobalt thought for a long time. "I don't think of it as being special. they said at last. I notice. I wait. I believe people when they show me who they are, even if it takes a while to show the soft parts. Love does not run out. It grows when shared. One day, a new child arrived, 7 years old, duffel bag thumping against small legs. The child's face was a careful blank. Cobalt excused themselves from an interview, crossed the room with that same gentle confidence that had welcomed hundreds before, and lowered their head so their eyes were level with the child's. Hello, Cobalt said in a soft, steady tone. I'm Cobalt. You are safe here. The Pritchards stood nearby with Suri, whose colors rippled welcoming greens and blues. The child hesitated, then set the duffel down as if it weighed less than before. Are you magic? The child asked. Cobalt's laugh was a friendly thunder far away. No, they said, just love that keeps practicing. The child's mouth twitched into something almost like a smile. That evening, as station night settled and lights softened, Cobalt made rounds the way they always did. They tucked blankets, hummed, listened for the small sounds that mean a room is loosening its fear. Dr. Kessar, older now, watched from the observation rail, her notes full of new pathways and old wonder. She had once asked herself what made Cobalt unique. Now she thought the better word was chosen. Cobalt had chosen, again and again, to meet the world with care. At the big window, kids gathered with grown-ups who had once been kids in Cobalt's care. They made a soft chorus, some humming, some telling jokes, some simply leaning against a friend. Suri painted gentle color on the glass with a light pen, and the hues pulsed to Cobalt's quiet tune. The atmosphere felt like a meadow under stars, even though it was metal and math and hard vacuum beyond. A little note rested on Cobalt's favorite cushion, scribbled in crayon. Thank you for teaching us how to listen to hearts. We're learning to listen back. Cobalt tucked it into a box, already full of treasures, paper birds, ribbon crowns, feathers, photos with bent corners, each one a map of love's travels. As artificial dawn hinted along the corridor, a baby in the nursery woke with a soft fuss. Cobalt patted in and hummed a sound that remembered warm water and held hands. The baby's breath evened. Cobalt smiled the way dragons do, with eyes and shoulders and a small sigh. Another day waited, full of small chances to practice kindness. It would never be perfect. It would always be worth it. And if you asked Cobalt what the story meant, they might say this: happiness is not the absence of storms. It is the presence of people who help you find a dry place and a warm song. Love isn't a trick, it's a habit. And habits, when shared, become the echo that keeps blooming, one hopeful morning after another.